There's a man who defeated Bruce Lee in a fight, not in a movie, in real life. A man who revolutionized martial arts choreography before Jackie Chan ever did a stunt. A man who directed, choreographed, and starred in films that made hundreds of millions across Asia while Hollywood was still trying to figure out how to make kung fu look good on camera. His name is Sammo Hung, and Hollywood looked at him and said, "No, what could make the industry reject someone that talented? The answer will make you rethink everything you know about who gets to be a star." The School of Pain. Let's rewind to 1952, Hong Kong. A boy named Hung entered the China Drama Academy at age 9, and his childhood ended that same day. This wasn't a school, it was a prison where children were broken down and rebuilt into human weapons. Master Yu Jim Yuen ran the academy like a military camp mixed with a torture chamber. Students woke before sunrise. They trained for 18 hours straight. They slept on wooden boards in rooms so cramped you couldn't stretch without hitting another kid. They ate whatever scraps were thrown their way, rice and vegetables if they were lucky, nothing if they weren't. The rules were simple and brutal. If you complained, you got beaten with a bamboo cane. If you failed to move, you got beaten harder. If you succeeded but not perfectly enough, you got beaten anyway because perfection was impossible, and Master Yu knew it. The beatings weren't punishment, they were the curriculum. Pain was how you learned. Fear was how you remembered. Sammo's body became a canvas of bruises and broken bones before he hit puberty. He learned acrobatics by being thrown into flips until his body figured out how to land, or until he hit the ground hard enough to understand failure. He learned weapons by having them swung at his head until he learned to dodge or took the hit and kept moving. Swords, staffs, spears, every weapon left its mark. Pain wasn't a consequence of training. Pain was the training. Your body either adapted or it broke. Most kids broke, and in that hell, he met the other boys who would change martial arts cinema forever. Jackie Chan, smaller and faster. Yuen Biao, the acrobat who could fly. Corey Yuen, the technician. Yuen Hua, the daredevil. They called themselves the Seven Little Fortunes, performing for crowds across Hong Kong while their bodies screamed in agony. They'd finish a performance, bow to applause, then limp backstage to ice their injuries before the next show. The audiences saw grace and beauty. They never saw the blood. But here's what that brutality created. By age 15, Sammo could choreograph complex fight sequences in his head, seeing every move, every counter, every camera angle before anyone threw a punch. By 18, he was working as a stuntman on Hong Kong film sets, taking falls that would hospitalize normal people. He fell off buildings without pads. He crashed through real glass. He set himself on fire and rolled until the flames died. And he did it all for pocket change, sometimes just enough for a meal, because that's what you did if you wanted to eat, if you wanted to survive. Most child actors from that era ended up broken, addicted, or dead by 30. The opera school didn't just train performers, it destroyed them systematically. Sammo survived by being tougher, smarter, and more talented than everyone around him. While American kids were going to prom and worrying about homework, Sammo Hung was becoming the most dangerous man nobody in Hollywood would ever want. The day he beat Bruce Lee, 1972. Bruce Lee was building Enter the Dragon, the film that would make him immortal. He needed the best stunt coordinators and fight choreographers in Hong Kong. People threw out names, veterans with decades of experience, respected masters with traditional credentials, but one name kept coming up louder than the rest: Sammo Hung. At 20 years old, Sammo had already worked on over 30 films. Bruce, 11 years older and already a legend, brought him in for a meeting. Here's where the story gets wild. During rehearsals, Bruce wanted to test Sammo, not as a choreographer, but as a fighter. This wasn't unusual for Bruce. He tested everyone, pushed them to see what they were really made of. They sparred. No cameras, no audience, no safety protocols. Just two masters in a room with nothing but skill and ego on the line. And according to multiple witnesses who were there that day, Sammo won. Not because Bruce wasn't skilled. Bruce Lee was Bruce Lee, possibly the greatest martial artist who ever lived. But Sammo had advantages Bruce didn't account for. Weight, power, a grappling background that gave him an edge in close combat where Bruce's speed mattered less. Sammo could absorb Bruce's strikes and close the distance. Once he got his hands on you, the fight changed completely. Bruce had dominated stand-up fighting his entire life. But Sammo brought him into a different kind of war. one where technique met raw physical dominance, and in that war, Sammo held his ground. Bruce respected strength. More than that, he respected people who could push him, who didn't fold when he tested them. Most people sparring with Bruce Lee pulled their punches out of fear or reverence. Sammo didn't. He fought back, and Bruce loved him for it. Bruce told people afterward that Sammo was one of the most talented martial artists he'd ever worked with. That wasn't casual praise from a generous colleague. That was Bruce Lee, the man who revolutionized martial arts cinema, the perfectionist who criticized everyone, including himself, saying this chubby kid from the opera school could hang with him, actually hang with him. Sammo didn't just choreograph fights for Enter the Dragon. He helped create the visual language that defined Bruce's final film. The speed that made strikes look faster than humanly possible. The impact that made you feel every hit through the screen. The way every punch looked like it could break bones. Every kick like it could cave in ribs. That was Sammo's influence bleeding into every frame. But Bruce died in 1973, and the door he might have opened for Sammo in the West closed before it ever fully opened. Bruce's death devastated the entire Hong Kong film industry. Productions shut down. Actors wept openly at his funeral. For Sammo, it meant losing a mentor who understood his value, who saw past the body to the genius underneath. Hollywood was looking for the next Bruce Lee. They wanted someone lean, muscular, someone who looked like their idea of a martial artist. Sammo Hung didn't look like anyone's idea of anything, and that would haunt him for the next 30 years. Still, Bruce's respect meant something. Within Hong Kong cinema, Sammo became untouchable. Directors knew if you wanted authentic action, you called Sammo Hung. And that's when he stopped waiting for opportunities and started creating them himself. The Hong Kong Years, Triple Threat Domination, 1977. Sammo directed his first film, The Iron-Fisted Monk, at age 25. It wasn't just successful, it was revolutionary. He played the lead, choreographed every fight, and directed the entire production. Most people can't master one of those disciplines in a lifetime. Sammo mastered all three before he turned 30. The film made millions and established him as a legitimate director, not just a stunt guy who got lucky. Then came the films that should have made him a global icon. Warriors 2 in 1978, where he introduced Wing Chun to mainstream audiences years before. Ip Man became a household name. Knockabout in 1979, mixing comedy with brutal fight choreography in ways Jackie Chan would later make famous. The Prodigal Son in 1981, considered by martial arts historians as one of the greatest kung fu films ever made. The film earned over 40 million Hong Kong dollars, and that's when 40 million actually meant something. Here's the kicker. While Sammo was innovating in Hong Kong, Hollywood was still making embarrassing martial arts films with white guys doing karate chops in slow motion. American action cinema in the early 80s was Chuck Norris films with fight scenes that looked like choreographed dance recitals. Sammo Hung was directing sequences where you could feel the impact through the screen, where fighters used real techniques, where the camera work made you believe people were actually trying to kill each other. His production company, Boho Film Company, became a powerhouse. He wasn't just directing his own films, he was producing hits for other directors, discovering talent, mentoring the next generation. Yuen Biao and Jackie Chan both owed parts of their careers to Sammo's guidance and opportunities. And while Jackie was the acrobat and Yuen was the technician, Sammo was the complete package. He could do comedy, drama, action, and horror. His fight choreography influenced every Hong Kong director who came after him. But here's the brutal truth. None of that mattered to Hollywood. Box office records in Asia, irrelevant. Revolutionizing action cinema, didn't care. Critical acclaim from every major film publication in the East meant nothing. Because when Hollywood finally looked at Sammo Hung, they didn't see a master of cinema. They saw a fat Chinese guy who didn't fit their formula. And that formula was about to crush him. Hollywood's door opens an inch. The 1990s arrived, and suddenly Hollywood noticed Kung Fu was profitable again. Jackie Chan's Rumble in the Bronx made $100 million in 1996, and studio executives started making calls to Hong Kong. They wanted their own Jackie Chan. They wanted martial arts stars who could bring that Hong Kong energy to American audiences. Sammo Hung's name came up in those conversations. How could it not? He'd been Jackie's mentor, his choreographer, his director. If you wanted authentic Hong Kong action, Sammo was the blueprint. But here's where the phone calls got weird. Agents would pitch Sammo to studios, and the response was always the same. He's talented, but does he have to look like that? The talent was undeniable. The resume was flawless. But Sammo Hung was 5'6" and over 250 pounds. In an industry that wanted Michelle Yeoh thin or Jet Li lean, Sammo's body became the only thing anyone could see. Jackie Chan broke through because Hollywood could market him as a comedian who did stunts. Lovable, non-threatening, funny. Jet Li got roles because he looked like a classical martial artist, lean and graceful. Chow Yun-fat landed in Hollywood because he fit the suave leading man archetype. But Sammo, he didn't fit any box Hollywood knew how to sell. Too heavy to be the hero, too skilled to be the joke, too respected in Asia to play the buffoon. So they just left him in limbo. Meanwhile, actors with a fraction of his talent were getting $100 million action franchises. Steven Seagal, who moved like a drunk uncle at a wedding, became a massive action star. Jean-Claude Van Damme, whose fight choreography was basic at best, headlined film after film. These weren't better fighters. They weren't better actors. They just looked like what a Hollywood wanted action stars to look like. Tall, white, and marketable to middle America. The irony was suffocating. Sammo had beaten Bruce Lee. He'd directed films that outgrossed anything Seagal ever touched in their respective markets. He'd choreographed action that made Van Damme's spinning kicks look like a child's birthday party trick. But Hollywood wasn't interested in who was the best. They were interested in who sold lunchboxes. And apparently, Sammo Hung didn't sell lunchboxes. Still, one door finally cracked open. CBS was developing a new action series, and someone pitched them the idea of bringing authentic Hong Kong talent to American television. For once, the stars aligned. In 1998, Martial Law premiered with Sammo Hung as the lead. Finally, after 30 years of being the best at what he did, Sammo was getting his shot at American stardom. This was it, the moment that would prove Hollywood wrong. Except it wouldn't, because Hollywood wasn't done rejecting him yet. Martial Law, the show that should have changed everything. Martial Law should have been Sammo Hung's vindication. The premise was perfect. A Shanghai cop comes to Los Angeles and uses traditional martial arts to solve crimes. Sammo wasn't just the star. He was the action choreographer, bringing real Hong Kong fight choreography to American network television for the first time. The pilot tested well. CBS ordered a full season. Everything pointed towards success. Then, the network started sending notes. The first round of notes was about tone. Too serious. Make it lighter. Add more humor. Sammo adjusted, thinking this was normal American television process. Then came the second round. The fights are too complicated. American audiences won't understand Wing Chun. Simplify the choreography. Make it more like a boxing match. Sammo's jaw clenched, but he compromised again. Hong Kong directors had warned him about this. Hollywood wants to sand down everything that makes you unique until you're just another product on the assembly line. But the worst notes came in season 2. The network decided Sammo's character needed a partner, a white partner who could explain things to the audience. Arsenio Hall joined the cast as a LAPD detective. And slowly, episode by episode, the show became about him, while Sammo got pushed to the side, in his own show. The martial arts master who had brought authentic action to CBS was becoming the sidekick in his own starring vehicle. The ratings were decent, not spectacular, but solid enough for a Friday night action show. But CBS had different standards for Sammo Hung than they did for white leads. When Walker, Texas Ranger pulled similar numbers, it ran for 8 seasons. When Martial Law hit the same benchmarks, CBS canceled it after 2 seasons, 52 episodes. That's all Hollywood gave him, 2 years to prove he deserved to be there, while Chuck Norris got nearly a decade to prove absolutely nothing. The cancellation devastated Sammo in ways the press never reported. He'd moved his entire family to Los Angeles. He'd learned English, worked with American crews, compromised on his artistic vision, and smiled through every insult disguised as a note. And it still wasn't enough. The message was clear. You can be the best martial artist on the planet. You can have a resume that makes us legends jealous, but if you don't look like what we want our heroes to look like, we'll find a way to push you out. Sammo returned to Hong Kong in 2000, and he never tried Hollywood again. Not because he failed, because Hollywood failed him. The industry looked at a once-in-a-generation talent and said, "We'll give you 2 years and a partner who's actually the real star." That wasn't an opportunity. That was an insult with a budget attached. Why Hollywood couldn't see what Asia knew. Sorry. Let's talk about what Hollywood couldn't say out loud, but everyone knew. Sammo Hung was rejected because he was fat. That's the secret nobody wants to admit. Not because he lacked charisma, not because he couldn't carry a film. Because executives looked at him and thought American audiences won't accept a heavy-set Asian man as an action hero. It's that simple and that ugly. The body issue became an obsession in every meeting. Agents would pitch him for villain roles, thinking that was the compromise. But even villain roles went to actors who looked menacing in a specific way, tall and muscular, or wiry and sinister. Sammo was stocky and powerful, built like a wrestler, which is actually what made his martial arts so devastating. But Hollywood had decided what martial artists should look like, and Sammo wasn't it. Here's the part that'll make you angry. Around the same time Sammo was getting rejected, Hollywood was casting martial arts films with actors who'd never thrown a real punch. The Matrix brought in Hong Kong choreographers to make Keanu Reeves look like a fighter. Charlie's Angels hired Yuen Wu-ping to turn Cameron Diaz into an action star. Studios were literally importing the techniques Sammo Hung had pioneered, using his colleagues to train their white actors, and then telling Sammo himself he wasn't marketable enough. And it wasn't just about weight. The real issue was Hollywood's leading man formula. Square jaw, tall, preferably white, definitely English-speaking without an accent. Sammo spoke English with a heavy Cantonese accent. He was 5'6" in an industry that wanted 6'2". He didn't have the classical handsome face that executives thought sold tickets. Never mind that he'd sold millions of tickets across Asia for 2 decades. Those tickets didn't count because they weren't sold in America. Compare that to how Jackie Chan broke through. Jackie succeeded by making himself non-threatening. The comedy softened the martial arts. The slapstick made white audiences comfortable. Jackie was the funny foreign guy who got hit a lot and smiled through the pain. That's what Hollywood accepted. But Sammo couldn't play that role. He was too dignified, too skilled, too serious about his craft. He wasn't willing to be the joke to make executives comfortable. The tragedy is that audiences would have loved him. When martial law aired, fan mail poured in from viewers who'd never seen anything like Sammo's fight choreography on television. Kids wanted to learn kung fu like him. Adults respected his presence. But CBS looked at decent ratings and decided it wasn't worth the risk of building around someone who didn't fit the mold. They'd rather cancel a show with a dedicated fan base than commit to an Asian lead who didn't match their outdated formula. Return to greatness somewhere else. 2001. Sammo Hung returned to Hong Kong, and instead of fading into obscurity, he reminded everyone why he'd never needed Hollywood in the first place. He immediately directed and starred in Phuket, playing an aging bodyguard in one of the most emotionally complex roles of his career. The film was nominated for Best Picture at the Hong Kong Film Awards. American critics who'd never heard of him suddenly called him a revelation. Where had this guy been? Right where he'd always been. Just not where Hollywood was looking. Then came collaborations with Donnie Yen, one of the biggest martial arts stars of the 2000s. Sammo choreographed and co-starred in Ip Man and Ip Man 2, films that made over $100 million worldwide and introduced Wing Chun to a new generation. The same Wing Chun he'd showcased in Warriors 2 back in 1978 when Hollywood was busy making Smokey and the Bandit. Ip Man became a global phenomenon, and Sammo's choreography was a massive reason why. But most Western audiences had no idea the heavy-set older man on screen was the architect of every fight they were watching. He kept working with Jet Li, Donnie Yen, and Wilson Yip, choreographing action for films that dominated Asian box offices, while Hollywood was recycling the same explosion-heavy garbage. The Bodyguard in 2016, Paradox in 2017. Every project showed he hadn't lost a step. His action choreography evolved with the times. incorporating MMA techniques and modern camera work while maintaining the bone-crunching realism that made his fights legendary. Here's the beautiful irony. While Hollywood was rejecting Sammo, they were stealing everything he'd invented. The Bourne Identity's kinetic fight scenes, inspired by Hong Kong action cinema Sammo helped create. The hallway fight in Old Boy, direct descendant of The Corridor, battles Sammo choreographed in the 80s. John Wick's martial arts. Sammo was doing gun fu combinations 30 years earlier. Marvel's fight choreography. They hired Hong Kong stunt teams who grew up studying Sammo's work. Hollywood took the techniques, hired his disciples, and made billions using the language Sammo Hung had written. But they wouldn't give him the credit or the opportunities. They'd rather pretend they'd invented it themselves than admit an overweight Chinese man from Hong Kong had been doing it better for decades. That's not just erasure. That's theft with a smile. The worst part? Sammo never got bitter. In interviews, he'd shrug and say he was happy as Sos, making films in Asia where people appreciated his work. He didn't trash Hollywood. He didn't play the victim. He just kept being brilliant somewhere else. That quiet dignity made Hollywood's rejection even more shameful. They didn't just lose a talent. They lost someone who would have elevated their entire industry. The legend Hollywood tried to erase today. In 2026, go ask any serious action director who influenced them. Sammo Hung's name comes up. Chad Stahelski, who directed John Wick, has openly talked about studying Sammo's fight choreography. The Russo brothers, who helmed multiple Marvel films, cited Hong Kong action cinema, specifically Sammo's work, as foundational to their approach. Gareth Evans, who made The Raid, acknowledges the debt modern action owes to choreographers like Sammo Hung. These directors grew up watching bootleg VHS tapes of Sammo's films. They studied how he used wide shots to show full-body technique. They learned how he built fights with rhythm and escalation. They copied his camera angles, his pacing, his understanding that great action requires geography and clarity. Everything they know about filming fights, Sammo taught them, even if they never met him. Film schools now teach Sammo Hung's choreography, alongside Bruce Lee's. The Prodigal Son is required viewing for anyone studying martial arts cinema. Warriors 2 is analyzed for its innovation in presenting Wing Chun on film. His directing style, blending comedy and action, created the template Jackie Chan would use to conquer Hollywood. But while Jackie became a household name, Sammo remained the master nobody outside Asia had heard of. The injustice isn't just that Hollywood rejected him, it's that Hollywood benefited from his genius while pretending he didn't exist. They used his techniques, hired his students, and made billions from the innovations he pioneered. Then they turned around and said he wasn't marketable enough to star in their films. That's not a business decision. That's institutional racism with a balance sheet attached. Sammo Hung is 73 years old now. His body has paid the price for 5 decades of being thrown through tables and kicked in the face. But his legacy is untouchable. He trained an entire generation of action stars. He revolutionized fight choreography. He proved you could direct, star, and choreograph all at the same time, and do all three at a world-class level. He beat Bruce Lee in a fight and earned Bruce's respect, which might be the greatest endorsement any martial artist could ever receive. What does his story represent? It's proof that talent isn't enough, that being the best at what you do doesn't guarantee recognition, that Hollywood's gatekeepers have always valued image over ability, marketability over mastery. Sammo Hung should be a name every film fan knows. He should have statues. He should have lifetime achievement awards from every organization that claims to care about cinema. Instead, he's a legend only the people who actually study film understand. But here's the thing about legends. They don't need Hollywood's permission to matter. Sammo Hung built a legacy that will outlive every executive who rejected him, every network that canceled him, every casting director who said he didn't look right. While they're forgotten, his films will still be studied. His techniques will still be taught. His influence will still shape every action film that gets made. Hollywood didn't make Sammo Hung, and Hollywood couldn't break him. That's the real story. The man who defeated Bruce Lee didn't need anyone's approval. He just kept being great until the world caught up. Some of us are still catching up. There are dozens more stories like Sammo's, and we're just getting started telling them. The real history of action cinema isn't written in Hollywood. It's written by the people Hollywood tried to erase.